Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another Thatcher Report podcast. I'm a bit slow on doing these more regularly, but it's kind of because I feel like I've articulated a lot of the big understandings that took me a long time to formulate. And I had a really instructive talk with a good buddy in the real estate industry. Hadn't really talked to him in a couple of years, but we're about the same age. We're both Jewish from more secular reform backgrounds. And we've kind of come to the same conclusion that the left is not what the left used to be, even 20 years ago. It's really changed. And we're not who we used to be. We've joined Orthodox synagogues. We've become more observant and just more like affiliated and less afraid of the left, which is the dominant political force. I'm not afraid of the right because they're not in my life. I'm a blue stater, probably will always be. And then there's more interesting nuance there. The right, which we'll get into, but the right is now the colorblind political party, and the Democrats are you must look at race political party, which is retarded, as they say in Massachusetts, but with a better accent. Okay, so this essay again. I'm Zachary Thatcher. This is the Thatcher Report. I write a Substack called the Thatcher Report under my name, zacharythatcher.substack.com. I tend to write the essays first and then podcast them later. It's my style. This one is DSA and MAGA versus America, and what's the least bad option out there. So here's what I'm seeing, folks. Now, the midterm elections are coming up fast, and I think we know a lot now that the Democratic primaries are mostly done in mid-August 2026. We have a lot of information in front of us. On the one hand, in the November election coming up, it's a referendum vote, as these usually are, against the dominant party, the dominant administration, which is, weirdly enough, the Trump MAGA takeover of the Republican Party. That takeover is complete for now. MAGA and Trump are hard to tease apart. Does MAGA survive without Trump, who's now 80 years old and going to retire soon from the political scene, we think? Hard to say, but hard to imagine that MAGA will be the same after Trump. He's clearly like Obama or Clinton in my lifetime, maybe JFK. He's kind of like a singular figure that is, and as they say in Hebrew, Yotzei min haklal, he's like extraordinary, and he has a passionate following that is more about him perhaps than his party or even his political theories. But I don't know. It's complicated. But it's a referendum about Trump and MAGA. And it's also, this is an opportunity in the fall for a change vote. But who would you be voting for? It's now the DSA progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. Now, that takeover is not complete. It's maybe halfway, I think. There is obviously a very well publicized loss for a gubernatorial race in Wisconsin, which has some bearing on the national scene. Governors tend to turn into presidents, and they're powerful figures, and they turn into senators, like Amy Klobuchar is sort of doing the reverse in Minnesota. But mostly it's been very successful for the progressives. The press always makes everything into a horse race. They don't really look at the greater sweep of history. It's not perhaps their job or ability, but the progressives are kind of taking over. And remember, what I always say is point out to me a young, moderate Democrat. There really aren't any. There's lots of young progressive Democrats. Some are DSA, some are DSA adjacent. DSA is kind of just it's great branding. It's easy to say, has the word Democrat in it, has the word America in it. So they're kind of, they're like MAGA, but they're taking over the Democrats, but not via a charismatic leader like Donald Trump. They're doing it with youth, social media, and a phenomenal ground game organizing. They are the best at getting out the vote. They don't need a lot of money to do it. They need infrastructure, which is cheap because of the internet, and going to get cheaper because of AI. And they have passion, and they have beliefs that centrist Democrats don't really have beliefs. It's not really clear what they believe. Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, they kind of bend with the wind. They don't seem to really have anything. Hillary Clinton even, like they don't really stand for anything. And guess what? Voters notice that on the left and the right because voters are smart. Politicians It's not that they're not smart, but maybe they're more craven. And voters don't have that problem. They just want to save their butts and vote. So what's happening now, we have this referendum on Trump. We have this maybe change vote for the progressives. And even though this is a midterm election, it's nationalized because that's what's happened to politics now. And I'm not going to go into great length explaining all that. That's been covered a lot in other podcasts and other writers. But Tip O'Neill said all politics are local. Excuse me. I'm from Massachusetts. I met Tip O'Neill when I was a kid, and he was obviously a very important leader in this country as the House Majority Leader for such a long time. But it's changed, and because of media, whatever, it's all national. So this is really another national election that we're seeing in the midterms. This is a collective American vote of consequence, and that's really interesting to study if you care about democracy. And just as a side note, if you care about democracy, you have to be open-minded to how people vote. Democracy means power of the people. It doesn't mean power of the pundits or power of the intellectuals or power of the working classes. It means power of the people, all the people. So if you're dedicated to democracy, you ought to be curious about why people are voting the way they do. Who's voting is very interesting, and why they're voting should be interesting. It's easy to judge it. I do that all the time, but I think it's better to be curious and open-minded. So this is a big election. And what's your least worst option? Obviously, it depends what state you're in a lot, because these are kind of fundamentally local and state elections. But what's your least worst option going forward? We have these two kind of counter ideas right now, MAGA versus progressives. Now, enough time has gone by in the second Trump administration, and he has this slim, but it's a very valid and potent trifecta of monopoly power in the federal government that we can kind of evaluate Trump's performance as of now. I think that's fair. What is it? It's getting deeper into 2026. He came in January 2025. That's quite a bit of time. Basically, not great. The economy is not great. It's better than it was under Biden, which had these horrific spikes of inflation. But that's the thing about inflation. It doesn't come down. It just stays high. It doesn't come down. Your wages are supposed to increase, maybe according to some PhD that they are increasing. But the reality is that things are still very expensive for Americans. They're just not getting as expensive as quickly. Wages, I don't care what anybody says, there's no way that wages are really keeping up with inflation. And remember, the PhDs don't look at the real things like housing, education, and healthcare. Those are all really important factors for inflation. Just speaking personally, I have health coverage for myself and my son. It's $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year if we're healthy. If we're not healthy, God forbid, we have a lot of copays and deductibles and denials and all types of stuff from the insurance companies. This is Obamacare for me. But you can't blame Barack Obama entirely. His inability to deliver meaningful healthcare reform is a problem, but it's Trump's administration right now. There's Republicans all through and through, Supreme Court, both bodies of Congress, and he hasn't done anything about healthcare costs. I'm sorry. Some of the stuff about pharmaceuticals, maybe, but it all feels like tinkering on the edges, which guess what? That's what Obama did. He tinkered around on the edges while having lofty conversations and speeches, and this is the legacy we have. Now, Trump doesn't talk like Obama, but he clearly has sort of the similar playbook. Just kind of tinker around the edges, blather on social media, and I hope nobody pays attention. So that's kind of what's happening with the MAGA economy. And the patient is stabilized. The economy is not in free fall, but it's status quo ante is not a great status quo. So how should you vote? How should you vote? Here's what I've been trying to really understand, how the parties are changing so much. And there's a lot of denial on the left that the parties are changing. On the right, they're like, yes, sir, we are pro Mr. Trump, or you get your head chopped off. So that's pretty clear. That change is real. The left doesn't seem to understand it as well. It's not really an introspective movement. It's an outward facing movement, not inward. But in any event, Here's the pitch that they're both making and why I think they're both having big problems. MAGA is for strength. Democrats are for justice with an asterisk. I add the asterisk to justice for Democrats because they're selective about which groups are deserving of justice and which aren't, which is a huge problem. But that's how it is. They don't say we want equity, they say we want racial equity, right? They talk about trans, which then pits them against women. And then obviously men are always at the bottom of the totem pole. So the Democrats have a hierarchy of preferences based on group identities, is the nice way to say it. The real way to say it is based on your genetics, on your skin color and your gender. Which is what the Nazis did, which is what the racist American governance of both political parties did up until the Civil Rights Movement. And it's kind of shocking and paradoxical that the Democrats don't even recognize this. But there you go, justice with an asterisk. Whereas Republicans want a strong America, America first, whatever you want to call it. They want strength. These are their pitches to the American people. They're both just fig leaves for give me power. And none of those things, strength or justice with an asterisk, are about what Americans care about, which is money. That's what Americans care about. They care about security first. We'll get into that. Assuming you have your physical security, you care about your money. That's how it is in this country. That's probably how it is in most societies, but I'm American, so this is what I know. This is why. So since there's not a money party or a prosperity party or a growth party, there's all this bullshit about make America strong and dominance, or there's all this bullshit about we're going to fix slavery and colonialism by rewarding trans people, which are men with boob jobs. That's going to solve the problem. Those are both kind of nonsensical arguments. One, I think, is slightly better than the others, but they're both kind of dumb. They're not talking about money. And that's why so many people are politically unaligned, because we're howling into the wind while the legacy media, the academy, any kind of locus of authority in our society, and approximately zero politicians are just focusing on money. It's really amazing. They always match the words affordability, which is the term on the left, or growth, which is the term on the right, with secondary, distracting, and often paradoxical theories, right? Like America's going to be strong, so we're going to have tariffs. Okay, well, that drives up inflation and that hurts my pocketbook, right? There's lots of good theories about why tariffs might lead to reshoring manufacturing. I'm very open and sympathetic to those theories, but I care about my money today and the factory being built hypothetically tomorrow, right? That's the problem with tariffs. I'm not a mercantilist. I'm not an economist. Maybe it's obviously all societies have tariffs, but clearly Trump using tariffs to gain political leverage isn't helping your bottom line. And then, of course, the paradox on the left, which is much more obvious, is they say we care about we care about affordability and justice. And part of our justice is increasing taxes and regulation. I live in New York. Mamdani is a very adroit politician on the left. He just doxed 900,000 taxpayers by publishing, or maybe it was 17,000. I don't know. It's a huge number. It kind of got winnowed down over time. But he basically doxed people who own pied-à-terre, second homes, by publishing all of their names, and they tend to be wealthier people. And he just does it to humiliate them and slap a big tax on them, which that's his solution for justice. Okay, I don't agree with that solution, but that's the pitch. That doesn't help your bottom line. Adding taxes doesn't lower expenses. It just creates larger bureaucracies that don't do anything. That's what it's like living in New York. So the good news for America is the bad news for both political parties. We are too smart to swing at either of these crappy pitches because Americans want prosperity. It's really simple. James Carville talked about this 40 years ago. It feels like 40 years ago. Is it 40 years ago? Maybe 30 years ago. But he's right then. And I don't know why he's a Democrat anymore. I don't think that makes any sense. But we want prosperity. Okay, here's how you get prosperity. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not running for office. I looked into it. It's just so complicated. There's a thicket of clubs and organizations, and you have to know people. It's a real inside ball game, at least in New York, which is such a big city, which is obviously a Democratic city. There's no opportunity. I looked into it on the Republican Party. They just don't have the infrastructure here. And it's like a very clubby inside world. It's too bad. It's not a great way to run a democracy, but there you have it. Yes, there's lots of exceptional stories like AOC, but those are the exceptions. That's not the rule. Um, but here's how you deliver prosperity. I'm just going to tell you. You have to have physical safety. You have to have infrastructure that unleashes growth. You need to have a policy environment that cuts red tape, reduces regulation, and limits litigation. And lastly, number 4, you need a monetary regime that delivers low inflation along with low interest rates. That's the magic formula. Everybody knows about it on Main Street. Funnily enough, no one talks about it in Congress or the White House. I don't understand why. I'm just going to go through the 4 points that I made to try to bring them home to you. Physical safety. That's what it means what you think. You should be able to walk outside. You should be able to go to work. You should be able to worship, play, and eat and breathe safely. So this is not only about removing mentally ill homeless people from the streets and subways like in New York and LA. It's about food quality, it's about air quality, and it's obviously about your physical safety from others who would deny you this, which is a huge issue now in the Jewish community in left-wing cities. And it is about grocery stores. They should make you healthy, not sick. And I'm not only talking about the salmonella and the other diseases going through our company from tainted food supply, which is a huge issue, but the food you eat should not make you sick. It should make you healthy. And that's a MAGA message, which is obviously very potent. And interesting, Democrats don't really have a rejoinder to that other than just wanting to talk about it. Or they want to confuse you by talking about trans children, which aren't a thing. So that's the safety one, right? You must enjoy safe passage, safe institutions, safe air, and safe food. That's job number 1 of the government. We don't have enough of that in this country. It's okay. We're not living in, Mogadishu, but you got to do that, number 1. And oddly, many Democrats don't focus on it. I don't know why. I think they would want to be safe too. The second really big one is infrastructure. This is so important, and it's so shocking to me now that I'm older and I've just more time has gone by and I've seen more things. It's kind of amazing to me how infrastructure, how this country is aging, as I'm aging, my own body is aging, and I'm seeing how the country is aging, and I don't think it's going very well. Certainly not in the Northeast or in California, which are the 2 places I live in and visit most frequently. If you're wealthy enough to leave this country for vacation, if you go to socialist Europe, tyrannical Persian Gulf, a liberal China, embattled Israel, or prosperous Japan and South Korea, you'll note that all of those places are really different forms of governance, right? From Dubai to Beijing to London to Seoul, they all enjoy, and to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, they all enjoy better infrastructure than we do, despite all their really different types of governance. Because what they have in common is they have money. Well, guess what? America has a lot of money too. We have more money than most of those places combined. But they spend it better. They, meaning the rest of the industrialized world, except for America, they spend their money better. And that's a problem, because it's not a problem just for the aesthetics of it. Think about what the infrastructure delivers. If you have better airports, more competitive AI, better trains, better roads, fixed up roads. I live in New York. Our roads are in atrocious condition. It's just a complete spaghetti. There's potholes in all of the highways. And I'm talking about like the faster roads, not just the surface streets. It's just a complete disaster. And there's no talk about, reforming them or making them better or streamlining like a big dig project in Massachusetts. None. There's no talk like that at all. The BQE is a major thoroughfare that goes from Brooklyn to Queens through, some of the densest parts of this country. It's very complicated, elevated highway. It's literally falling apart. And there's not a single politician. I know the New York Times and a lot of people praise Mamdani. He's sort of like the new Obama for some people on the left. Doesn't talk about it. So, or if he does talk about it, I don't know that I believe anything he has to say. So, but you need infrastructure, because infrastructure is a tool that government subsidizes to enable people to make things they can sell to others, right? You make a good road, the farmer can get to the market. You make trains so people can get to the market, then they can buy the stuff from the farmer. We're not making enough of this stuff in this country, because guess what? Infrastructure gets bad over time, and you got to fix it and build new stuff and keep up with the Joneses. And we're just not doing that. So that's safety, that's infrastructure. And then let's look at regulatory policy and monetary policy. It's really simple stuff besides the fancy words. The role of government is to balance our safety with our economic growth. That's the policy side. So you need regulation so that when you're inside a building, it doesn't fall down around you. But you can't have so much regulation that you can't build any new buildings. This is something almost no Democrats seem to understand or want to deal with. There are some exceptions to that, but by and large, they generally want more regulation and more taxes and fees, which have a regulatory impact. For example, when I take an Uber, I don't really do it anymore because I'll tell you why in a second. But if you were to take an Uber in the 5 boroughs in New York City, you get about 4 or 5 different fees tacked onto the Uber fee, right? So you pay Uber whatever the market rate will bear. That's the Uber algorithm based on time of day and traffic and if it's raining, whatever. And then on top of that, there's an MTA fee, there's a congestion fee, there's a this fee, and a that fee. It's literally like 4 or 5. You see them on your bill every time you take an Uber. It makes Uber really, really expensive. And then you just don't, people like me, middle class people, just don't use it. Or if you use it, you just don't have money for something else. And that's a regulatory decision. Kathy Hochul and other people in the Assembly and the State Senate, they just made a decision to add all these taxes, and nobody pushes back on it. So it just makes your life more difficult, right? That's the money argument. They want to earn money for governance, but they don't want to have money in your pocket as a regular person. Excuse me. So monetary policy is, I guess I didn't write about it in my essay, but monetary policy is what I said before. It's you want to have low inflation and low interest rates, right? Easy to say, hard to do, but that's the job of the Fed. Maybe Kevin Warsh will do it. He seems to be a pretty smart guy. But those are the 4 things we need to do. And the point is that government can facilitate economic policy, economic prosperity if it wants to. We're a very wealthy country. We're the most entrepreneurial country in the history of the world. Americans make more new things than anybody else. We make streaming services and all new types of television shows. We make the most amazing movies the world has ever seen. They are just absolute marvels of storytelling. We make video games. We make video games as even a bigger industry than movies. We make cars. We make lots of airplanes. We make weapons. We make the iPhone. We make laptops. We invented all of this stuff and we make it all. Airplanes come from America. We landed on the moon. We invented, with the help of the Defense Department, this is what I'm talking about, we invented the internet. We didn't invent the web, technically. That came from a researcher, I think, in Switzerland, but we sure as heck capitalized on it and made it our own in this country with Google. We made the search engines. America is amazing. We have the bones to have really great prosperity for more people than just a few at the top, but our government doesn't seem to understand this or facilitate it, because they're talking about stupid shit that doesn't have to do with economics. So let's talk about some of that stupid shit. And I'm surprised by myself that I'm cursing, but here we go. So Democrats talk about restorative justice, racial equity, or just old plain social justice. Now, Those are slogans that the Democrats have cooked up to differentiate themselves from Republicans from maybe the 1960s, right? They're good, they have good origins of ideas, right? I don't think they mean this anymore, but the way I interpret social justice is that we should live in a free and colorblind society. That is a moral way to live. You should not judge people by their skin color. People should be free. That's the whole point of America. And by the way, if you live in a free society that doesn't judge people by their skin color or their origins or their gender, you get rich, right? You have more people working, more people inventing things, more people putting their shoulder to the wheel, and you get rich. It's a great recipe. It part of that observation explains why America does so much better than many other countries. Yes, we're very big. Yes, we're sheltered by the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. We don't have Mexico and Canada. It's not like being in the Middle East for Israel or something, or France versus Germany in World War II. But nevertheless, our diversity and our freedom is a great strength. So that's what social justice should mean. Obviously, the Democrats don't mean that anymore. They do not believe in a colorblind society. They say it very clearly that that's impossible. There's marginalization, there's oppression and privilege. So you can't be colorblind. You have to kind of double down on racism, but invert it. And then you're going to get to this utopia that, by the way, is not achievable. So it's a bit of a digression, but these are kind of these dumb ideas that muddy the water when we should be talking about prosperity, right? Ironically, it's Republicans who now champion a colorblind society. J.D. Vance just talked about it the other day. I have a lot of reservations about him as a man, but he's certainly an important spokesperson for the Republican Party. And he talks about a colorblind society. Chief Justice Roberts also talks about it. I personally find it very convincing when they talk about a colorblind society. I do not find it convincing to have DEI or other euphemisms for discrimination because they bit me in the butt as a Jew. And now I learned my lesson that working class people have noticed for a long time now, and I'm a little bit late to the game. And there's no such thing as positive discrimination. You can't have a policy for it. It just leads to hate and violence. And that's what we're seeing on the left. So I don't like it. So funnily enough, the Republicans are now the ones who are advocating a colorblind society. And I think that's a better idea. Nevertheless, what we're talking about is the money. So the Republican line of thinking is that we want America to be strong and dominant. Now, I'm sympathetic to this because I realize that we live in a tough world. And if we're not strong and dominant, guess what? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, some other country will be strong and dominant. And I don't want that. I want it to be our country, not just because I'm a jingoist or an American chauvinist, because maybe I'm those things too, because I'd rather live and my neighbor die if my neighbor is attacking me. But at the end of the day, I think we have a better country. I think the U.S. Constitution is better than being in a tyranny or a highly socialist regulated economies like in Europe. And I just think that we should be dominant. It doesn't mean we have to take over the whole world, which we essentially did after World War II, but it means that I don't want any competition from anybody else that's a threat. I want us to be the dominant ones. So Republicans talk about that. I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm good with that, considering my options. Like in Europe is completely socialist. They have so much regulation. They don't invent any of the things I talked about. And because of their immigration crisis, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that in the next 20 years, Europe is renamed as North Africa. It won't really be Europe anymore. And that's a great deal for North Africans, but I don't think that's the key to prosperity. I don't think the people populating Europe as migrants are going to be liberal, colorblind people focused on prosperity. Doesn't seem to be the track record. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit between these two different viewpoints of strength versus justice with an asterisk. They're both good ideas, is my point. The U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the fact that Pilgrims and Puritans came here from England, they were looking for social justice. We, the people, it's not It's not we the states or we the churches or we the palaces. It's the people. It's the power is in the people in this country. It's really, really amazing stuff. These are good things. The Voting Rights Act in 1964, these are really good things. We should support all this stuff is. But why aren't politicians of any background just talking about money? Just talk about the money. Don't have these ridiculous racial or gender ideas. Like trans is not a thing. It's ridiculous. You, in your heart, you know it's ridiculous. If you spend time around that I see pretty frequently in Brooklyn, men with boob jobs, okay, then let them do what they want. They are not a new gender, people. They're men with boobs, is what they are. They don't have special rights. They shouldn't challenge the way that God makes men or women. It's just the whole thing is bonkers. And also the strength ideas of the Republicans. Yeah, we're so strong. Well, how come Iran is beating us in a war right now? How come Russia has not been decisively repelled out of Ukraine? Right? If we're so strong, where are the manifestations of our strength? I'm not really seeing it. What other countries are like more adapting to our method of the economy, which I think is problematic, but better than others? I just don't see it. How come Cuba hasn't already become a free market, free country? It's a tiny little island. How come that hasn't? I'm not saying we should go attack Cuba, but it's like if America is so strong, okay, prove it. How are we so strong? Kind of looks like China's taken our lunch, honestly, and Iran. So, and we didn't get the nukes out of North Korea. We didn't get them out of Pakistan. So, it rings hollow, this Republican talk about strength all the time. Really, they should be talking about money. Anybody. I'll listen to anybody. I don't care what color is on their lapel pin, right? It shouldn't feel like survival to be middle class. That's how I feel. That's my emotional default setting. I do okay, right, as an earner, but it's just okay. I'm always scared about not remaining middle class. My parents or my father does not come from middle class. He comes from a rural poverty class. I don't want to descend into that, right? I have many working class relatives. They're doing great, but I want to be middle class. I want to be comfortable. I want to be secure in that. So why does it feel like survival when you're middle class, right? Shouldn't it not feel like survival? Isn't that the whole point of being middle class? Shouldn't you feel comfortable? Here's another question. Why is there so little class mobility? Now, people say that it sounds kind of fancy, like jargon, but here's another way of saying lack of class mobility. It's like having a caste system. How you are born is how you will die. So if you are born into a family like I was, that's liberal, white, college educated, well, that's how I turned out, right? And that makes me an elite, even though I'm anxious about my elite, my relatively low elite status, but I am that elite based on my earning because I'm educated, liberal, and white. So that's a caste. I'm of that caste. I'm of the college white caste. And then there's a multicultural working class, right? That's the thing people don't seem to understand. Working class have a lot in common with each other that crosses race lines. It's the caste that I'm from that doesn't seem to understand that very well. But then the multicultural working class, they can't afford stuff, housing, education, healthcare. Okay. So that's their caste. If you're born into that, there you stay. We have a gigantic drug addicted underclass. You literally see them dying on the streets in blue states. This is the reality. There's a ton of homeless people. There's a ton of very, very poor people that are drug addicted and have mental health problems. And then, of course, people I don't really see very often. I occasionally bump into them, but I don't live with them. A very narrow slice of wildly rich individuals. And they have perfect economic security, but to attain that security, they have at least $10 million in their bank accounts, usually much, much more than that. And it's a really narrow slice of humanity. That's our caste system. It's 4 different castes. The very, very, very rich at the top, the upper white educated elite, the working class, and then the underclass, right? That's not good. We're not supposed to have a caste system. People left England to come to America for religious reasons and to escape the caste system, right? The people who followed the religious nutcases who came here in the triangle hats, the people who followed were like, yeah, I don't want to be poor in some hovel in rural Scotland. I want to make some money in this country. And guess what? They could do that back then. And that's becoming less probable now. The other big problem, or the other big issue that no politicians are talking about, is why can't America build anything? So that's that's kind of about the infrastructure argument that I was making that should be a policy priority, and that I never hear anybody talking about infrastructure really in a meaningful way. But why America can't build anything is more than just like liberal regulatory populism in blue states that block housing and now data centers. And they also blocked fracking. So a bunch of people made money from fracking and a bunch of people lost money but the fracking still happened. It's a good instruction. The oil got extracted, the shale oil or the natural gas or whatever the fossil fuel product is, it got extracted. It's not like people stopped using fossil fuels because New York State denied fracking. They just took it from Pennsylvania. So workers in Pennsylvania made that money. Workers in New York didn't make that money. So I think that's kind of stupid. Same thing for the data centers. You think we're not going to have an AI revolution? It's already happening. We need more data centers. You can block them in one state. Another state will build them instead. Those people will get those jobs. So that's freaking stupid to block this. But I'm not just talking about liberals not being able to build stuff. I'm also talking about the military. Now, we've seen this situation in Iran, and there are these leak stories. There's not a lot of leaks usually in the Trump administration. It's very instructive to pay attention when there is a leak. There is a leak right now about not having enough defensive munitions. I think we have enough bombs to bomb anybody, but we don't have these kind of interceptor missiles. They're really expensive. They take a long time to make. And meanwhile, we don't really know what to do about drone warfare. The Wall Street Journal had an article the other day about Ukraine, about an exercise between the Ukrainian army and the American army. It's an exercise with drones, and the Ukrainian army smoked us. They also did this for European armies. We have no answer to drone warfare in this country. Part of the reason is because we can't build stuff. We can't build a gajillion cheap, really effective drones. We can't build a bajillion cheap, really effective interceptor missiles. Israel, as a sidebar, has a theory with their laser to shoot them down, and that's really cheap, but that's like a new thing. I don't know. We'll see if that works or not. But the point is, America can't build anything. That's a really big problem. That relates to infrastructure, regulation, and opportunity. And these are the things that if politicians talked about it, because it's all related to prosperity, right? If you can build stuff quickly, that's a lot of jobs, right? And it creates new things, because this drone technology that you could use in a warfare, maybe you could use it for combating forest fires or to survey crops or whatever. Like there's all types of new uses come out of these technologies. Weather balloons came out of the Civil War, things like that. But nobody's talking about it. Okay, well, I'm just a guy with a podcast. What are you going to do when it comes to the ballot box in November? Here are your options as far as I understand them. Republicans and like 5 Democrats who talk about abundance, they seem to have the best track record and theories for improving the economy. They at least have ideas about it, right? That seem like good ideas, like they're anti-regulatory and stuff like that. That's why Trump won the election about Harris. It was mostly about inflation. But Trump squandered this because he was focused on the strength argument. Now, Trump seems to confuse the idea of him being strong and America being strong, sort of a metonym for America, like Louis XIV or whatever. I am the state. But no matter how you analyze it, I think Trump squandered this great argument he had against inflation with the tariffs that don't seem to be working and all of his graft or corruption. Now, technically, his moves are legal, right? So I don't really know the right nomenclature for it, but I'm not stupid. Working class people aren't stupid. We all see what's happening. He's getting richer. His family and his friends are getting richer, but I'm not. That's the bottom line. And so if he's focused on that and he's not focused on really combating inflation, then that's a problem. That's something he squandered. He squandered that win. And by the way, this is sort of an aside, but it's related to costs. He doesn't seem to understand how to win a war in the Middle East. Now, my friends, I'm going to teach you very quickly how to win a war in the Middle East. There's kind of 2 steps. Step 1 is that you recognize that it's the Middle East, not the Midwest. We're not talking about America. Middle East is not in America. It's in the Middle East. It's a very different region with very different values. It is not the West. It is not like um, America. It is not like Holland or France. It is the Middle East. It's a very different region. And guess what? The people there take their values very seriously. They don't think they're wrong. They think they're right. And if you have to fight those people, which we had to do since the founding of the Republic from the shores of Tripoli, here's how you fight them. You don't talk to them, you shoot them. And then you get to talk about victory when the other side can't talk because you've killed them. That's how you win a war in the Middle East. It's really brutal, but for some reason, Republicans and Democrats don't seem to understand that. You don't negotiate, you don't have conversations, you wipe out your enemy, period. Then you go on to do something else. Likewise, Democrats have squandered their claims of social justice. I've talked about this a lot before. The civil rights movement was a high point in this country, not just because we had the civil rights movement, but because the legislation for the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act was bipartisan with large majorities. That signals a really dramatic shift in this country from one that tolerated racism, practiced racism, that was built on large part due to slavery. Our economic success agriculturally was built on slavery, quite a subsidy, right? And the country collectively agreed that we needed to go into a new direction in the 1960s, and we did that. I think in my lifetime, the epitome of this was in 2015 with the Supreme Court deciding for marriage equality, right? That was another group, not as bad as Jim Crow and lynching and everything, but still horrific, the homophobia in this country and Matthew Shepard and the AIDS epidemic. And we finally got to equal rights and full inclusion for gay people in 2015. And to me, that was 11 years ago. A lot has changed since then. And from my perspective, from my values, and from my where I live in blue states, it's been a resounding success. Nobody talks about it anymore. It's just a fact of life. There are more gay people in the Trump administration than any other presidential administration before. That shows you how widespread it is, just like the civil rights movement being bipartisan. I mean, the civil rights legislation in the 1964 and 65 being bipartisan. That's just amazing. And the left has completely screwed the pooch by doubling down on discrimination instead of saying, okay, great, clean our hands off. We did a great job. Now let's go on to the next challenge, which guess what is prosperity. Martin Luther King talked about this. They all don't think about Martin Luther King. They might give lip service on the left to Martin Luther King, but they completely tarnish his whole reputation by doubling down on really crazy ideas of critical race theory. They don't use those terms anymore, but now they talk about decolonialization. It's all a bunch of nonsense. And if it's not nonsense, it's discriminatory hate movement, which is what it really is, because people like Mamdani and El Sayed and so on are not stupid. They're very intelligent people, and hate gives them a lot of political power. So unfortunately, the strength argument and the anti-inflation argument that Trump had has been squandered. And the social justice argument that the Democrats, they just went a different direction with it. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they're doubling down on it with the progressive new flavor of the Democrats. That's all progressive is. It's just a new, more intense flavor of the same old sauce. They're not any different from mainstream Democrats. That's why zero mainstream Democrats criticize progressives. They either endorse them or sort of pretend that they're not around, like Frances Hong. They kind of pretend she doesn't around. Guess what? She kind of went away, so that was smart for them, but then they'll go endorse somebody else. So MAGA, like the new progressive Democrats, they talk about the right stuff. They talk about the economy. Bernie Sanders has been talking about it his entire adult life. It was always the right conversation, but he doesn't only talk about the economy, and that's the problem with Bernie Sanders and the progressives. And because it's hard to believe that the ideas are going to work, they tarnish them with discrimination. And like MAGA, unfortunately, MAGA doesn't have a track record of success. It's now August 14th, 2026. I don't see a big success with MAGA. I think it's better than what Harris would have done. I think pushing back on DEI at the universities and getting rid of it as a policy and articulating that there are two genders only, I think those are really good and positive things for this country, but it hasn't been a wild success. We're still having trans issues in the WNBA and all this stuff. Those people are still fighting that fight. DEI has just been changed into different names. We still have selectivity on the left that they think is okay and constitutional. And meanwhile, the working class people, regardless of your skin color or gender, they are left holding the bag. And it's a really, really big problem. So what do you get? What do you do? Do you vote for Trump's coalition? Do you back socialism for just the people will tell you deserve the socialism coalition? That's what the progressives are essentially saying. It's a really hard choice. Welcome to democracy. It's a mess, but it's better than anything else. I wish you luck. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.